Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 4, verses 18 through 31, a bridegroom of blood, in which is probably one of the most difficult passages in the entire Pentateuch. Let's look at it. Exodus 4:18, then Moses departed and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law. This is after he'd been speaking with God, had been given that commission by God, and said to him, "Please let me go that I may return to my brethren who are in Egypt and see if they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons. Now we've only been told about the name of one son, but this is plural. We're going to see the name of one of his other sons a bit later in the book of Exodus. So Moses took his wife and his sons and mounted them on a donkey and returned to the land of Egypt. Moses also took the staff of God in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders which I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go." This is letting us know what's going to happen with all those plagues, that God's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. "Then you shall say to the Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I said to you, let my son go, so that he may serve me, but you will have refused to let him go. Behold, I will kill your son, your firstborn.'" So notice it's firstborn against firstborn. Israel is God's firstborn, and Pharaoh has a firstborn, and because Pharaoh is threatening God's firstborn, God's son Israel, God is going to end up taking Pharaoh's son, his firstborn. And what we're going to see in the next verse is a threat to take away the son of Moses. Let's look at that. Now it came about at the lodging place on the way that the Lord met him. And our big question is, who's the him? The Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and threw it at Moses' feet. And she said, "You are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him alone. At that time she said, "You are a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision." Now, the first question is, who's the him? I think the natural reading, most interpreters look at this and think it's referring to Moses. He's the one that we had seen earlier in this passage. He's mentioned here again at Moses' feet. Now, the other possibility is that the Lord met one of the sons of Moses, because we're going to read about that son right here. But I think it's probably speaking about Moses, that God had just commissioned Moses, and all of a sudden the Lord's meeting him and seeking to put him to death. What on earth is going on? And the issue revolves around the circumcision of one of their sons. And so notice, then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin. That's dealing with the circumcision. And threw it at Moses' feet. And she says, "You're indeed a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him go alone. And at that time she said, "You're a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision." What's happened here? Circumcision was the sign of the Abrahamic covenant. And all members of the Abrahamic covenant were supposed to be circumcised. And if they were not, they were breaking the covenant. Remember, if you break a covenant, what happens? Well, you die. And so here is one of the sons. It doesn't say both. I'm assuming it's not both. But it sounds like one of the sons of Moses had not been circumcised. You say, well, why not? Well, perhaps they were following some other customs. You see, circumcision was known, yes, among the Jews, but it was also known among the Egyptians. Now, among the Egyptians, they did it different. Among the Egyptians, they would wait until the male child was going into puberty, and then they would circumcise that son. I remember being in the temple of Karnak, and there's a picture just outside their Holy of Holies, the innermost part of the temple, and on the wall just outside of that, there's a picture of a young man being circumcised. And I can't read the Hebrew because I don't read hieroglyphs, but I've been told it says something like, "Be brave, my son," or something like that. And among the people in the area of Midian, I can't say this is for sure about the Midianites, but among the people in the area of Midian, and those countries that would later on become Arabian countries, circumcision was known to them also, but at this very early date, they would be circumcised just before getting married, or so I'm told. In any case, it looks like one of the sons of Moses had not been circumcised, or that circumcision had been delayed, but in any case, it had not yet taken place. And in doing that, he's transgressing the Abrahamic covenant. And God's going to be sending Moses to represent God. And how can Moses represent God when he himself has broken the covenant? And so the Lord meets him and is about to put him to death. And Zipporah takes a flint, and she performs this operation that usually the father would perform, but instead she does this, and she throws it at Moses' feet. Now some have wondered, gee, is that a sort of a euphemism? When you talk about covering your feet, you were going to the restroom. Remember how Ruth comes and uncovers the feet of Boaz, but I just take this as feet. Threw it at Moses' feet. She said, "You are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me." So he left him alone. And notice how it's repeated. At that time she said, "You are a bridegroom of blood." And notice it's repeated because this is so important. Don't miss this because of the circumcision. You see, that term bridegroom, usually when that Hebrew term is translated, it's usually talking about son-in-law. And maybe that's a hint of what's going on here. Maybe the reason that Moses had not circumcised his son had to do not so much with Zipporah, but with her father, with Moses' father-in-law, who had been a priest of God, and yet didn't really know the Lord. Because later on in Exodus chapter 18, after they come out of the Egypt, and after God does all those wonders, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, is going to come and meet Moses. He's going to hear all about it, and he's going to say, "Now I believe." But that hadn't happened yet. But maybe this is where Zipporah begins to believe. You are indeed a bridegroom of blood, as she performs the circumcision. And it reminds us that we also have a bridegroom of blood. We have one who was pierced for us, who was cut for us, who shed his blood for us, that we might be his bride. Now the passage goes on. Now the Lord said to Aaron, "Go meet Moses in the wilderness." So notice there's a meeting with the angel who meets Moses and Zipporah and that son. But now there's another meeting. The Lord said to Aaron, "Go meet Moses in the wilderness." So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. And then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. He then performed the signs in the sight of the people, so the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about the sons of Israel, and that they had seen their affliction, then they bowed low and they worshipped. And when we see that one who was a bridegroom of blood for us, we're called to believe, and then we're called to bow low and to worship.